My grandfather worked as a butcher at FedMart, a supermarket in San Diego. He was a tall Chinese man with big hands and always had a story to tell.
At work, he would wear a white hard hat, dark-rimmed glasses, and he would always wear his favorite red vest underneath the store's standard issue white smock.
There was always a constant whir and high-pitched grind of the bandsaw when the blade would hit the bone, as he and his co-workers would shuffle around carrying sides of beef in the red speckled sawdust.
At their cutting blocks, with sharp boning knives shaving away the white from the red, the constant white puffs of banter would float around each other in the cold room.
Hey Lou,
That is what they called my grandfather.
America can wipe out China anytime it wants.
That was Gary from Indiana, and this was the 1970s. Gary was tall and lanky with stringy blonde hair.
My grandfather chuckled under his hard hat.
Is that right?
He said patiently. My grandfather was in his 60s and getting ready to retire and Gary's mentor. Gary would come over to my grandfather's house with a six-pack and drink a few, hang out, talk and laugh, help out some if grandfather was working on something, and then ask for advice.
Yeah,
Gary retorted.
America has the most technologically advanced military in the world and can easily wipe out China.
Gary was a walking thermometer. His blood would immediately rush to his face to help express his emotions.
Is that right?
My grandfather responded. Grandpa had seen a lot of things. Growing up Chinese in segregated Mississippi, shipped back and forth between China and Mississippi for school, and being kicked out of Japan after the Marco Polo Bridge incident.
Yeah, that's right.
Gary said.
We got M16s, bazookas, and Patton tanks.
Gary was looking straight to my grandfather's broad back, his face beginning to flush.
Is that right?
My grandfather said patiently. He was thinking about when he joined the Marine Corps a couple months after Pearl Harbor and fighting in World War II in the Pacific Theater for the duration of the war. He had fought in Tarawa and Guadalcanal and was part of the occupational force in China, but he didn't talk about it.
Damn right.
Gary snorted.
We got them claymores, that crazy sticky flaming shit, napalm, cobra copters, and Puff the Magic Dragon. Shit, there ain't no use in fighting us.
Impressive,
My grandfather said smoothly.
but not important.
Grandpa's mind was back in his village in China when he was a boy fishing in the winter. The communal pond was covered in a thick layer of ice, and he and his friend found a large clay pot, filled it with hot water, tied a rope around its neck, and lowered the burnished brown pot into a hole in the frozen pond. A pot filled with heat-lusting, shimmering fish offered a bit of hope during these desperate times in concession towards China. His mind continued to wander and encounter memories of seeing parks with signs that said no dogs or Chinese allowed.
Damn right impressive.
Gary continued, flicking open his hand as he counted out with each finger a list of U.S. armaments.
We got your howitzers, your B-52s, your Tomahawk cruise missiles, and then the Black Dragon battleship.
Gary rubbed his hands together, feeling he was on an invincible red-faced roll.
None of that is important. China can wipe out the United States anytime it wants.
My grandfather continued to stuff chunks of beef into the meat grinder, curly pinkish hamburgers squished out of the other end of the grinder into his hands. He was on the train on furlough from the war.
Wearing his Marine dress blues. The train was cutting a narrow path through the southern woods on his way to Coahoma, Mississippi via Memphis. Each train was filled with African-American soldiers returning from the war, returning home.
The forward engine began to slow down to a stop on a train station filled with energetic members of a welcoming committee from some unmemorable small town.
Tables neatly dressed with white linen piled with mounds of donuts and steaming pots of coffee laid at the ready to serve their returning heroes. When the all-white welcoming committee members saw the dark faces in the train cars, they began to overturn each table, spilling hot coffee and tumbling soft donuts all over the platform floor.
Important. Important.
Gary was at his reddest boiling point. Desperate for air, he gasped.
The United States of America is the supreme superpower with the most technologically advanced military in the world, and we can easily wipe out China whenever we want.
Gary was no longer deboning pork butts as his veins began to surge.
We have F-4 fucking Phantoms, goddamn Sturgeon submarines, cocksucking earthquake bombs, and the motherfucking USS Shangri-La. Now Lou, what do you say to that?
Easy as Pall Mall smoke, my grandfather turned around and smiled at an exploding Gary.
Imagine 1.5 billion Chinese walking to the shore of East China Sea, lining up, one by one, shoulder to shoulder, facing the United States in the gap between Japan and Taiwan.
My grandfather was facing Gary with his hands hanging by his sides, bending at his knees.
Imagine these Chinese acting as one, jumping up and down,
creating a magnificent tidal wave
that would sweep across the Pacific,
wiping out
the United States.